This beautiful young woman is about to go on trial for her life.
Travis told friends that Jodi would show up unannounced at his house.
And I said, Travis, I'm afraid we're going to find you chopped up in her freezer.
She would sneak in through the garage door because she knew the code.
She was tape recording him.
Seriously, think about having sex with you every day.
Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's My Mystery, and in today's video we're going to be talking about a case that I think might actually be overdone, right? And that's the case of Jodi Arias. We all heard so much about her, it seems like we can't escape her, and her video on my channel is the most viewed video that I have to date. It's got nearly 2 million views, which is insanity. But I recently did a deep dive on her background, and it got me thinking, because with my last video, What Makes a Monster with Sheena Hubers, I really wanted to dig into the background and ask why someone like Sheena Hubers would be created, her pathology, why someone would act the way she did. And I kind of wanted to find out a bit more about Jodi, and I found out a lot of stuff, most notably her past relationships. Travis wasn't her first boyfriend, obviously, and he wasn't her last before she actually got arrested. And I think it's so interesting because if you look at Jodi's background and some of her past relationships, we could see a clear pattern. And it's all, to answer the question, what would make someone like Jodi? What situations would go into creating a character such as hers? And I'd like to share it with you guys. So Jodi Ann Arias was born in Salinas, California on July the 9th, 1980 to William Angelo and Sandy D. Arias. She is an older half-sister, 2 younger brothers and a sister. And beginning at age 10, Jodi showed an interest in photography, which continued throughout her life. Her childhood years were actually quite unremarkable, although she has said numerous things, like at the trial she said her parents abused her, hitting her with wooden spoons and a belt, and this abuse allegedly began when she was 7 years old. One thing that's quite interesting is when she was 6 years old, Jodi was noted to have hit her younger brother Carl on the head with a baseball bat. A babysitter named Beth Hawkins said that Jodi seemed like an exceptionally aggressive child. And while babysitting, she said she couldn't leave the 2 children alone without some sort of violent or destructive incident. So I think that was interesting to note, an exceptionally aggressive child. Maybe that hints that Jodi's pathology was something that she was born with. Who knows? Jodi dropped out of Wairika High School in the 11th grade. She actually dropped out because she wanted to pursue a professional career in photography while working at part-time jobs. This didn't really go to plan. We realise, as time goes on, when we hear more about the story, and that's what leads Jodi to her eventual encounter with the man who she took the life of. But before that, Jodi was quite a troubled teenager. When she was 14 years old, Jodi was said to have routinely fought with her parents, shoving her mother Sandy, kicking her, and at least one occasion she actually punched her mum in the face. So yeah, I don't know if that's really exceptional. I know a lot of teenagers fight with their parents, but it still is aggressive. And her mum actually discovered in the 8th grade that Jodi was using her own Tupperware to grow marijuana on the roof of their home. Her parents called the sheriff's department, who bucked her and 2 of her friends. So that's pretty interesting. She was obviously very, very rebellious. She dropped out of high school. She was growing marijuana on her roof. I wonder how long it took them to actually figure out that Jodi was growing marijuana on the roof. And also, one thing that's notable is that her parents called the police. I guess that was the right thing to do, of course, but it is also a bit, it's a bit extreme because they could have went on a record and, change the direction of her life. I don't know if a lot of parents would phone the police on their kid if they were doing that. But her father did note that after that, it was like something turned in her head. She hid everything from her mother and him, and always had since then, and she had never been honest with them since that incident. It was around that time that Jodi became more secretive, and she alienated herself from her parents, barely even speaking to them. And what's interesting is that when Jodi dropped out of high school and decided that she would move in with a boyfriend, who we'll get to in a minute, Jodi's parents claimed that she became, in their opinion, very mentally unwell, to the point that even Jodi's own friends would call her mother at night to inform her that she needed to get her daughter some help. They also stated that Jodi would freak out all the time and that she has mental problems. So it is possible that Jodi could have had an undiagnosed mental illness, whatever it was. So it was actually in August 1995, when Jodi was at a carnival with her friends, that 15-year-old Jodi met 18-year-old Bobby Juarez for the first time. He was unemployed and on crutches. Okay, and Bobby Juarez had long dark curly hair, and Jodi said that he had an 18th century goth kind of look. And even in Wairika's triple digit temperatures, Bobby wore a high white collar shirt under heavy dark clothes. So he was obviously a goth, had the gothic kind of style. And I think that Jodi might have been attracted by the rebellious nature of it, if we sort of put piece to piece together on other things, going on in Jodi's life when she was a teenager. And Jodi and Bobby together rode the Zipper Carnival ride, and they began talking. She was very intrigued by him, and the two of them ended up becoming friends. And it was actually in January 1996, according to Jodi, that this is when her and Bobby began dating for the first, officially as boyfriend and girlfriend. And when she was 15 years old, Bobby told her that he wanted to get married, move to San Francisco and hunt vampires. Just to pause for a moment to process that. And Jodi, who was a freshman in high school, saw this as unrealistic and too intense, so she broke up with him. So yeah, even 15-year-old Jodi finds this guy too intense and also unrealistic in his plans. So this guy was definitely a character, if you ask me, and it's a very interesting choice for her first serious boyfriend. I guess, like I said, she was attracted to how different he was. But according to Jodi, Bobby was physically abusive. He choked her, put her in arm locks, and even made threats to Jodi's family. And according to her as well, that he was so distraught by the breakup that he tried to kill himself, which, to be honest, with the profile that he's painting, it doesn't surprise me that, he was intense in that regard. And she claimed that he was committed to some kind of psychiatric ward in Citrus Heights, just north of Sacramento. And in August 1997, after Bobby had been committed to a psych ward because of his breakup with Jodi, Jodi travelled to Costa Rica to study Spanish on a student exchange program. She was only there for a month, but she had a brief romance with a local teenager named Victor Arias, who was no relation to her, of course. But during the relationship, Victor actually gave Jodi a promise ring and told her that he wanted to start a family with her, which is interesting if you think about it, because we noticed the same sort of pattern coming from Bobby. It was very intense relationship for a teenager. And when Jodi actually returned home from Costa Rica, her and Victor maintained a long distance relationship until she broke up with them because he was quote unquote too possessive, which is another thing that we see from her last relationship. She quoted that Bobby was too possessive and physically abusive and even threatened to kill himself when they broke up. So it shows that Jodi kind of has this thing for intense relationships. She was in a very controlling relationship, and then she got with someone else who was quite possessive too. Then on September 1997, Jodi was working in her parents' restaurant, just waiting tables, and she claimed that she often saw a man who was in his 60s or 70s who carried a heavily annotated pocket Bible and frequently quoted scripture, who regularly came into her parents' restaurant. He told her that he has done the math in the Bible and that the second coming was going to occur on September the 23rd, 1997. Jodi claimed at the time that she fully believed this guy because she was quite naive. And because her ex Bobby was uncertain about his spirituality, Jodi thought that it was important that he knew this information so that he can make a decision over whether he wanted to be a Christian or not, apparently. And together again, as the second coming was on the horizon, Jodi and Bobby rekindle their romance and begin dating. 98, after the second coming was supposed to have occurred but didn't, Jodi was ditching school. Her father actually caught her, and this wasn't the first time that he caught her, and he decided that of course she was grounded. But Jodi, now that she was 17, decided that she was going to leave home, drop out of high school and move in with Bobby, the kind of boyfriend that everybody wants their daughter to have, still unemployed, who was living in Oregon with his roommate, Matt McCartney, who we'll get to in a moment. So when Jodi moves in, she provides financial support for the three of them by working as a waitress at Denny's. So that was some situation, I bet, in Oregon. Very interesting. I wonder how Bobby's vampire hunting career was going, but I'm pretty sure that they were probably doing very little together, the three of them. And it's interesting that Jodi was the one who was financially supporting all of them. Very strange situation, and I can see why her parents were worried. And then fast forward to August 1998. According to Jodi, she snuck into Bobby's email account and discovered that he was exchanging love letters with another woman. And then Jodi breaks up with him. So that must have been some blow to Jodi's ego. She's financially supporting this guy. She moved to Oregon. She ditched her parents and dropped out of high school. And he's cheating on her, well, emotionally, behind her back. Very crazy situation. So what does Jodi do in this situation? No, she doesn't move back in with her parents and decide to continue high school. She actually starts dating the other guy that lived with them, the other guy she was financially supporting, Matt McCartney, in January 1999, which is so interesting because can you imagine if you were living with your boyfriend and his friend, you break up with your boyfriend and then you start dating his friend? That must have been a really, really crazy situation to be in the middle of. And I don't know what to say about that. Like, I wonder how Bobby felt if he was having emotional problems just with her breaking up with him. I guess this really would have rubbed salt in the wound. And to be honest, it hints at a little bit of spitefulness in Jodi's character. She could have just moved back where her parents are and continued her life, but no, it looks like to me that she had to get even, and I guess Matt McCartney was her way of doing so. So Jodi and Matt continued dating, and they actually moved to Wairika and got a 1-bedroom apartment, just the two of them. So Bobby was out of the picture, and Jodi ended up actually celebrating her 21st birthday while they were together. So she turned 21 on July the 9th, 2001. But by August 2001, things got a little bit rocky with Matt. So Jodi claims that while she was working at Applebee's in Wairika, 2 women who are customers tell Jodi that her boyfriend Matt is secretly romancing another woman. Bianca is how I pronounce it, but I know in America it's Bianca, I think. Probably wrong. Whatever. And when her shift was over, Jodi made the 70-mile drive north to Bianca's dormitory in Crater Lake, Oregon. On her arrival at the dorm, Jodi asked a mutual friend, Steve, for Bianca's room number. And according to Jodi, Steve appeared frantic and intentionally gave Jodi the wrong number. But Jodi, being the genius she is, figured out the correct room number and knocks on the door. Bianca answers the door, talks with Jodi and confirms that her and Matt are indeed having a relationship. So instead of driving all the way home, Jodi spends the night with a nearby friend, a male friend named Eddie Lee. And then, of course, Jodi and Matt were no longer a couple after that, but they remained friends with benefits. So I think that's interesting. Jodi obviously was very angry to have to drive all the way over 70 miles, to be precise, to Crater Lake in Oregon to confront this woman. But I wonder, was their breakup a peaceful one? I couldn't find any information about it, but she did immediately jump into the arms of another guy, which we know Jodi is quite famous for. And it's interesting that they remained friends with benefits. Like, this girl, she seems to have no, I don't know, like, knowledge when it comes to relationships, in my opinion. Like, such a mess. And then in early 2001, Jodi and Matt both make their way south seeking work in Central California's lucrative tourist industry. And at the Ventana Inn and Spa in Big Sur, California, Jodi is interviewed by a man named Daryl Brewer. The food and beverage man is impressed by Jodi and he hires her immediately. And according to Jodi, a couple of days later, Matt got hired as well. And like most employees at the Ventana, Jodi and Matt live in tents on designated campsites owned and operated by the resort. Jodi and Matt continue a no-strings relationship as friends with benefits. But by late 2002, Jodi actually began dating the man that interviewed her manager, Daryl Brewer, which is super interesting. You know, she went straight to the top of the hierarchy in this company to date. I don't know, I find that kind of interesting, a little bit telling, to be honest, of Jodi's kind of character. Sorry if that, you know, comes across bad, but I just think that that's really interesting. Not that there's anything wrong with dating your manager, but like, I don't know, like Jodi, come on, we all know it. Like she uses her feminine wiles to advance, in my opinion, from the research that I've done and the videos I found on the internet of her even speaking to investigative officers. But I digress. So Daryl says this is the time when he decides to step out of his management position, and the 42-year-old divorcee takes a position as event coordinator. So he was no longer Jodi's supervisor. So that's interesting too, that he stepped down when he started dating her. I'm not sure about how laws work in the US. Maybe it's forbidden to date an employee under you. I don't know. But obviously, if that is the case, he liked her so much that he was willing to give up his job. Also, Daryl had a son named Jack who was 3 years old. By January 2003, after attending a San Francisco 49ers game, Daryl and Jodi spend the night together. The two fall in love, taking their relationship to a more serious level. Daryl describes Jodi's sexual appetite as aggressive and enthusiastic. So that's another person who's described Jodi as aggressive just from her past. And he says that they're both very comfortable with their intimacy. On the witness stand, Daryl recalls that they had anal sex at least once, but cannot recall whether or not they did it more than once. Okay. And it was around this time then that Jodi moved to Palm Desert, California. So together with her boyfriend in May 2005, they bought a house actually in Palm Desert, California. And they agreed to split all the costs 50-50. So this looks like this could have been for the long haul. And at the time they purchased the house, Daryl is living off his savings and seeking employment. And Jodi works as a waitress again in California Pizza Kitchen. Jodi's parents, Bill and Sandy, ask if they can make the trip down and visit to see Jodi's new home. Her father, Bill, Arias, recalls Jodi as saying, "Where are you going to stay? I don't want you here snooping through our stuff." So still a very fraught relationship with her parents. And by February 2006, Jodi actually began a new job working with prepaid legal services. And that is the job that is infamous because that is where she met Travis Alexander. And by April 2006, Daryl started to see changes in Jodi's behaviour. He said she sounded like a different person. There's actually an interview of him on YouTube. I was thinking of, doing a video on it, but where he starts talking about how Jodi talks about like magic and stuff. And once I was watching it, that was the most alarming thing. And also, I don't know, I just got some vibes. I'm not going to talk about it here because I don't want to get sued, but I got some vibes. Anyway. And by May 2006, Jodi ended up getting a boob job, a breast augmentation in California. So something obviously, made Jodi want to level up in life. She began a marketing job, which is different from the waitressing jobs that she had before, and got a breast augmentation. Could it be someone she met at Prepaid Legal? Who knows? And by June 2006, she was taking her spirituality more seriously and she converted to Mormonism. Mormon men began showing up for weekly Bible study, and Jodi stopped having sex with Daryl and insisted that he stopped using profanity. And while they're no longer sleeping together, their relationship fizzles to an end. And by August 2006, even though she's still working with Prepaid Legal, Jodi decides to stop paying her share of the household bills. So that, I think maybe deep down Daryl believed, he's obviously not a stupid person. He probably picked up on the fact that Jodi might have met someone, and that was true. And by August 2006, Jodi completely copped out of her relationship with Daryl and decided to stop paying her share of the household bills. So who was that person she met? Well, that's a silly question to ask because we all know. During her time working for Prepaid Legal, she attended a work conference at Las Vegas, Nevada's MGM Grand. And it was a professional event, but it was like a party kind of atmosphere. Lots of people were having fun. And Jodi, of course, thought that this was amazing. She worked as a waitress before, and going to a big paid party by a company obviously was like, a new frontier for Jodi. So in the distance, she sees the man he hired her, Dr. David Hughes, and he called out to another man and said, "Hey, Travis, there's someone that I want you to meet." She noticed that her boss was pointing at her, and then a man walked right up to Jodi, extended his hand and introduced himself. It was Travis. Obviously, as a lot of reports have said, there was so much chemistry between them, and throughout the next 48 hours, the two of them spent most of their free time together. Travis was apparently completely smitten with Jodi, and he took it upon himself to convert Jodi to the Mormon faith. And once the conference had came to an end, they decided that they were going to stay in touch and they exchanged contact information. Of course, Jodi went back to Daryl, and that's once her behaviour started to dramatically change. So we noticed that pattern of Jodi kind of moves from one relationship to another with very little time in between. I think maybe she falls in love easy, or maybe she's seen Travis as like a ticket to a better life. We don't know. But Travis was living nearly 300 miles away. So the relationship between them at the start was long distance, basically. But it wasn't long before Jodi got addicted to, I think, Travis's idolization of her. If you watch, there's actually a couple of parts documentary by 48 Hours, I think, where I found out some information where Travis said that he had found his wife after he met Jodi, and that he was completely smitten with her, and she was, one of the best people he'd ever met, and how lucky anybody that ends up with her is going to be. And of course, Jodi probably loved all this attention, all this idolization. So Jodi kind of decided, well, I guess this is the person for me. And Daryl quickly got the boot, and she kind of left him, pretty quickly. And by October 1st, though, in the stage of Travis's sort of idolization of Jodi, one of his friends found her MySpace page, which involved witchcraft. And he warned Travis, saying that he got a bad feeling from her and that she's a bit creepy. And by October the 15th, Travis decided that he was going to maybe go traveling with Jodi or meeting up with her at various romantic vacation spots, probably to get to know her better. And they decided that they were going to go to Niagara Falls, Grand Canyon, Carlsbad Canyon and Disneyland. And they did get to know each other. There's a lot of information, that Jodi says at the trial of things that went on. Apparently, they got sexual pretty quick, even before Jodi converted to Mormonism. And by November 26th, Jodi was baptized into the Latter-day Saint faith by Travis. And according to Jodi, after the baptism ceremony, she and Travis go back to his house and had anal sex, which doesn't seem very holy to me. I don't know how that led, being baptized into, doing that, but whatever. And Jodi actually testified that she did practice anal sex with different men and that she didn't sort of consider this as proper sex, and that, it was her way around it, which, to be honest, the logic doesn't really make sense to me, but it's interesting. And then once Jodi decided to, integrate herself more into Travis's life and he wanted to introduce her to his friends, that's when things really started to get really crazy, and sort of like the pathology of Jodi became a lot more apparent. February 2007, Travis and Jodi begin to date exclusively, and they begin having sex, full sex, without being, disclosing too much information or being too graphic. And by March 2007, Jodi and Travis keep traveling. They visit several states together, including New York, Oklahoma, and Texas. And according to Jodi, in one of their many getaways, they rent a car. And when she gets behind the wheel, Travis starts, how do you say, taking the mick, we would say in Ireland, out of her, because Jodi has positioned the rear view mirror so that she has a clear view of herself as opposed to the traffic behind them. Travis sees Jodi as a great girl, but she's a little bit more possessive than he would like, and she's not always completely honest. But their sex life does please him. It's wild, insane, and incredible, as he has been quoted as saying. And one weekend, Travis's good friends Chris and Sky Hughes invite Travis and Jodi to spend a weekend at their home in California. And after spending some time with Jodi, Sky actually states that she gets really bad vibes about her. Later that night, after Jodi has gone to bed, Chris and Sky decide to have a talk with Travis and tell him to be very careful about this girl. They share their worries with him, and to their surprise, suddenly discover that Jodi is actually standing right outside the door listening to their conversation like a complete psycho. Sky said that when she seen Jodi's face, it was of pure anger, pure anger, and that it was really alarming to her. I think it was around this time that people really started to get the impression that there's something really wrong with her, that she's not normal. And when I, look into the background, of Jodi and her past relationships, I think to myself, like, what is it? Is it an insane sort of possessiveness? Is it a fear of abandonment? Or is it just an ego that needs to lash out whenever it gets bruised? Would she see Travis, losing interest in her as a defeat? Apparently the women around Travis did not like Jodi at all. Maybe Jodi felt like there was competition with her and she didn't want to lose. Either way, whatever way that we can look at it, Jodi and Travis's relationship breaking up would seem like a big ego blow to her. And I feel like she wasn't going to let that happen easy. Chris does tell Travis that Jodi is no longer welcome in their home, and Chris and Sky both encourage him to distance himself from Jodi. By April, Jodi knows that, they don't like her, so she tries to isolate Travis away from his usual group of friends. And one weekend, other friends of Travis, Jacob and Holly Melford, are visiting the home of Chris and Sky Hughes, and suddenly and without knocking, Jodi walks into their house unannounced. Which, if you think this girl is crazy and she just shows up at your house without knocking the door, that would ring a lot of alarm bells. Like, I think I'd phone the police. Jodi asks Sky why she and all the women hate her. And Sky, furious, gives Jodi a comprehensive list outlining why they don't like her and adds that Jodi is not welcome in her home and asks her to leave now and not come back. And an hour later, while Holly is making food, Jodi walks into the kitchen, sits down at the dining room table and just stares at Holly for 15 minutes. So if this was happening to me, I would literally probably, phone the police. Someone that's just walking into your home, acting aggressive, terrifying. But Travis doesn't break things off completely with Jodi. And by June the 29th, 2007, Jodi is fully pretty much stalking him. She looks through his cell phone, spying text messages from other women. And Travis, started to realize that this is a bit too much. And he tries to break off the relationship. He says that they should start seeing other people. And as it was coming to his 30th birthday, Travis makes it common knowledge to his friends and family that he is focusing his sights on finding a more traditional Mormon wife. And Travis did say that his opinion on Jodi had changed from once they first met, and there's nothing about her that I see in marriage material or wife material. Probably because, she is crazy and would be a nightmare to have to live with for the rest of your life. And by July the 9th, 2007, after Travis tried to end their relationship, Jodi leaves California and relocates to Arizona, 4 miles from where Travis lives. Which, if you didn't think she was a stalker by, up until then, you're sure now. And even though they're no longer exclusive, Travis accepts Jodi's recurring offer for no strings attached sex, and the two slip into a secret role of friends with benefits, which always ends so well, especially when your friend with benefit is a fully fledged insane stalker. But if there's any advice, it's like, if someone's a stalker, tell the police, get away from them. But I know Travis was a very nice person, probably, and didn't want to aggravate the situation even more. But and by mid-July, Travis goes out to his car one morning to find all 4 of his tires had been slashed. Everyone knows that it's Jodi, and his friends say it's definitely Jodi and that she's properly stalking him now. But they still sleep together, which is crazy. And Jodi repeatedly enters Travis's home unannounced without his knowledge. And this is like, she's a proper stalker now. And the thing that I sort of want, wonder in my head is why? Why couldn't Jodi let Travis go? And why did she always have to get one up on the men that she dated? I think it's not to do with her ego. She's definitely a sociopath or a psychopath, definitely. The fact that she had, violent outbursts as a child makes me think that maybe she's more psychopathic, but that's just my opinion. But there's definitely something with her that she really takes any slight very seriously. So Travis, now on his hunt for a more traditional Mormon wife, starts dating more traditional Mormon girls. One of them was 18-year-old Lisa Andrews, and they dated on and off. But they did seem to be on different paths by the time they were dating, because Travis did want to marry, but Lisa was not ready yet. And Lisa testified in court that Travis was thinking about sex a lot when he was with her. Since the moment they started dating, and that they made out a lot, which made it hard for them to abstain. But Lisa was determined to not have sex before marriage. So she decided to write an email to Travis explaining how she felt that, that sometimes it felt a little bit too tempting once they were having these long makeout sessions, and that she actually stated to him that she feels that he just wants her for her body, and that there's a lot of sexual tension, and he has so much, sexual tension for her. But Travis actually acknowledged how she felt and that he respected her wishes, and he treated her very differently from that point. She also made a note to say that he was never abusive or aggressive in that regard or disrespectful. But yeah, they were on different paths, and I think that sort of fizzled out. Meanwhile, on Travis's search for friend and Mormon wife, Jodi was in the background, really not letting go. At one point, Travis was away on a business trip and both his roommates were out of town, and Travis asked his former girlfriend to go to his house and check on his dog. So his former girlfriend, Deanna Reid, goes to the house, and as she walks in, terrifyingly, Jodi is sitting on the couch with his laptop and baking cookies. She then gets the tray of cookies and asks Deanna, his former girlfriend, to have one. So Travis is away on a work trip and Jodi is living in his house and they're not together. That's insane. And the insane incidents continue from there. By July 25th, 2007, Travis goes on another date with Lisa and he successfully suppresses his sexual urges and drives her home and kisses her goodnight. It is really nice. And he after the kiss goodnight, Travis starts to get really aroused because she smells really great, apparently. And returning home at about 10, he goes back to his apartment where he opens his closet and finds Jodi inside. Sorry, I just think that's crazy. Like, he goes home after a date and Jodi is in the closet. Like, that's absolutely insane. He's really angry by this, of course. And Jodi initiates, you know what? Let's just say that. And of course, because Travis is so aroused by his date with Lisa, shit happens. And I feel like this is where Jodi sort of like her strength in trying to keep Travis in her life steps into. She kind of was like his crutch for his urges because he had to suppress them with the women that he actually wanted to be with. So interesting. Anyway, Travis is on another date with Lisa by August 2007 and things get really intense, which leads to Lisa taking off her bra. And yeah, so I can understand what they mean. They should probably be careful because things kind of got out of hand at this point. So they're being passionate on the sofa and everything's going well. And then they see Jodi standing in the backyard staring at them through the window. Lisa actually screamed out, "Shit!" and put her bra back on. And Jodi ran to the car and drove off. Oh my goodness. Like, that is insane. I can't imagine you look out the window if you're on a date with a guy and his ex-girlfriend is staring at you. Like, you would be out of that situation faster than, anything. That is insane. Yeah. Sorry if I'm laughing a lot. I just find that this part is so funny because I just can't imagine what would bring someone to stalk their ex so much. On August the 2nd, 2007, Jodi, who regularly writes in her journal, makes this entry. She says, "I love him, though I could not possibly love him not, though I wish I could stop, turn it off like a light switch. Duct tape it down so it can't turn back on, or better yet, just cut the circuit, cut off its life source, make it dead in a second, lifeless, a meaningless network of wires that do and mean nothing." So deep, man. I do feel bad for her if she does really love him and she just couldn't get over him, but you have to bite the bullet and move on, no matter how hard it is, if you're not right for each other. To turn into like a raging stalker is just too much, man. And by August the 4th, one night when Travis and Lisa were in her kitchen, Jodi walks into Lisa's house without knocking. She's a habit of doing this. And when Jodi sees Travis and Lisa in the kitchen, she turns and runs out the door. So she walks into Lisa's house. Why didn't anybody tell the police? This is crazy. And by September 2007, the house that Jodi once owned in Palm Desert goes into foreclosure. So things are going rapidly downhill. It's almost like she had like a mental tipping point. She just lost it. You know, she was crazy most of her life, but at this point she really just lost it. And Jodi's parents actually said that her friends used to ring up her mum and said Jodi has mental problems and she needs help. So that does hint that there was something seriously wrong. And I don't know, like I don't want to like criticize anybody in this story, but Travis should have really been firm with her. But I know maybe his urges, and you know, he wasn't sleeping with the Mormon girls he was dating and all this. And Jodi, it was just a terrible situation through and through. By Christmas 2007, Travis decides to visit his family, and he spends some time with his brother Stephen's baby niece. It would be Travis's niece. And they have a lovely family moment together. And Travis is more motivated than ever to have a family and be a great Mormon dad and the usual. And then he goes home and finds Jodi in his house under his Christmas tree. This time he's like, Jodi, you need to leave. So he's finally like, no, I have my path and I'm going to stick to it. I'm not going to be tempted by Jodi. And while on a date with Lisa, Jodi starts following Travis and her again. And then things get really weird. She receives a threatening email and text messages. Oh my goodness. I remember hearing about that email she sent her. She was using all this weird, language like your heavenly father would be ashamed of the whoredom that you committed, like just to try and really psych out someone who takes their religion very seriously. Crazy. And yeah. And of course I have to add that it was around this time that Jodi claims that she found Travis masturbating to a photo of a little boy, but pinch of salt. It is important to note that around this time, actually, she wrote in her journal that I haven't written because there's nothing noteworthy to report, and that she had turned down 4 offers for a date. So if that really happened, wouldn't that be noteworthy to report? I don't know. And then by this point, Lisa started getting her tires slashed, and it's just too much, and her and Travis end up breaking up but remain good friends. So Travis ends up then dating a woman named Mimi Hall, and they date briefly. Jodi continues with her madness, crawling through doggy tours, sleeping on his couch. They sleep together again and again and decide to keep the relationship a secret. It's really, really, it seems like it's impossible for Travis to break it up. Of course, Miss Jodi's moving across the country to live in his state. It makes it hard too. She's staring through windows, once he's dating people, and yeah, it's crazy. Then around April 2008, while Jodi is still stalking Travis, she meets another Mormon that she decides to take a liking to, and that was a Mormon named Ryan Burns. She met him at a prepaid legal convention in Oklahoma, and she likes him so much that she calls one of her friends and asks the friend to put in a good word for her with Ryan. But it was around this time still that Jodi was still tormenting Travis. She slashed his tires once again on April the 13th, 2008, and told Travis that she was going to kill herself. And Travis was worried about her, so he cancelled his speaking engagement that he had planned and, tried to counsel Jodi. So the relationship between them was continuing, but by this point I doubt it was romantic, or if it was in its last stages. So on April the 20th, when Travis was alone in his bed, he was woken at about 3 o'clock in the morning by the sound of a vacuum cleaner. And he walks downstairs to find Jodi vacuuming his carpet. I think at this point, the penny really did drop for Travis that this woman was completely insane. And she was not going to take no for an answer. Then Jodi decides that she's going to move out of her residence in Arizona and returns to California and moves in with her grandparents. Travis actually helped her to pay for her move, which is a sign, obviously, that he was extremely happy to be rid of her. But Jodi is still torturing Travis. Somehow, even when she's living from California, she manages to stay in his life and even has phone sex with him, and they have long conversations, which Jodi records and later played in court, to try and frame Travis of his, insatiable sexual appetite, to paint a picture of him that, would benefit her defense. So by May 26th, 2008, it was pretty much came to, D-Day with Jodi and Travis, and they were fighting over text. Travis actually said to Jodi, "I am nothing more than a dildo with a heartbeat. You are a sociopath and you're the worst thing that ever happened to me." And I just thought that was so interesting. Imagine getting to that point, with everything that they've been through. And like I said, the stalking, climbing through doggy doors, breaking up future relationships, not being able to get rid of this person. I'm going to kill myself. Please help me. Travis finally hit his breaking point. And I think it was this point that secured what happened next, in my opinion. I think that, like we talked in my last stalker videos, that when there's some sort of like disruption or ending, that's when things get really dangerous if you're being stalked. And it was around this time that Jodi decided to start preparing the murder. So it's common knowledge what happens next. I'm actually not going to go into it in this video because it's already been long enough, and I really wanted to discuss the backstory leading up to these events. If you do want me to talk about the events that actually transcribed, lead into this murder, the preparation, what happened after it, I could do that for you. But I just think it's been done so much. And the point of this video was that I wanted to really talk about the relationships that she had that led her to this point. I'm not saying that they contributed, in my opinion. We're getting to the conclusion of it now. I believe that Jodi was born different. I believe that she had something, this is just my personal opinion, but I believe that she was a psychopath, to be honest. If you look at her exceptionally aggressive behavior when she was younger, even just watching an interview with her, looking in her eyes, the calmness, in her presence, the fact that nothing really phases her. In my opinion, this woman was a psychopath. When it came to the stalking, I think we're so quick to label someone like Jodi with like BPD, fear of abandonment. But Jodi actually was the one that left a lot of her previous relationships. She called it off with people, which doesn't speak to me of a fear of abandonment. If you had a fear of abandonment, you probably wouldn't get involved with people like this anyway. In my opinion. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. For me, it was more about power and one-upmanship. Jodi really didn't like to be slighted. She was an extremely spiteful woman, in my opinion. She had to get one over on everybody that wronged her. And that's why she took Travis and that whole situation so intensely, because she felt very wronged, by his friends who didn't like her, by him who deemed her not good enough, which, to be honest, Jodi was never in a position before. She left all her other exes, really. It was always her paying the rent and, shining and going for these sort of like unemployed vampire hunters, Bobby the Vampire Slayer, for example. And she never really had that point of having to look and think that maybe her behaviour and the way she acted was just not acceptable. Jodi was obviously perceived to be a very attractive woman, and that probably carried her throughout her life. And she used her sensual powers to manipulate those around her. And I think when she kind of hit that point, that moment where she realised that that's not actually a good way to function in this world. You don't have to be, one-upping everybody, and you don't have to use your sensual powers to control people. When she met someone like Travis, who was someone who had in a lot of ways in life, altruistic motives, I think that really confronted Jodi with the fact that she might not be the best kind of person. And I think that subconsciously this sort of led to her, breaking point, which made her have to get rid of the physical manifestation of her not being good enough. I think with Jodi, a lot of the themes in this story are to do with ego. I think that a big part of, her personality was made up by her ego. She took her image and how she appeared seriously. I think there could have been underlying mental health problems in the fact that, she started to believe in magic when she was with Daryl Brewer, but then the law of attraction is common knowledge now to a lot of people, and it doesn't mean that you're mentally unstable. It just means you're spiritual. But at the same time, there is a pattern of instability in every aspect of Jodi's life, whether it's her education, her jobs, or her relationships, that show that she was a troubled person. Maybe her mind just wasn't meant to function with people in this world, and this is how so much drama was created in her short time of freedom, before she got arrested. It's one of the most interesting cases out there, if you ask me. And that's why it holds so much of the public's perception. In my opinion, Jodi is one of the clearest examples of a psychopath from what we know of her. I can't say for sure because I never met her, but I think she's one of those people that you can really, hold up and say, whoa, this person was very dark. So like I said, if you want another video talking about the actual murder and what happened, I will make it for you guys. But I think it's been done, so much that I wanted to provide this sort of backstory version. So I hope you liked it, and I hope we learned something from it, that we can recognize the patterns that were kind of in this person's pathology. And if you did, like and subscribe, and I will be back again soon with another video. Thank you guys. Bye.